Disclaimer. This story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. The evening had settled into a quiet hum, the kind that makes the world feel smaller, more intimate. I hadn't expected to see her tonight, my ex's mom. But there she was, leaning casually against the kitchen counter, a soft smile tugging at her lips that made my chest tighten. Our eyes met, and suddenly the air between us seemed charged, like the faint crackle before a storm. She reached for a glass of wine, but in that instant, our fingers brushed. The touch was brief, almost accidental, but the electricity it sparked was undeniable. I swallowed hard, aware of the heat creeping up my neck, of my heartbeat hammering in my ears. She didn't pull away. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, letting her gaze linger just a second too long. That tiny pause, that almost imperceptible look, sent shivers down my spine. "You've changed," she murmured, voice low and teasing, just enough to make the words feel personal. I tried to focus on anything else, the dim light, the quiet ticking of the clock, but all I could see was her, the curve of her smile, the way her hand rested near mine as if it might stay there. My fingers twitched, almost drawn toward hers, and I could feel a nervous energy rising in my chest. A charged silence settled between us. She leaned in, just slightly, and I caught the faint scent of her perfume, a mix of something floral and warm that made my stomach flutter unexpectedly. There was an intimacy in the closeness, a dangerous kind of teasing in the way her eyes searched mine, and I couldn't tell if she was daring me to step closer or testing how much I already wanted to. "Do you remember what I said last time?" she whispered, her tone soft yet insistent, drawing me in. My mind scrambled, heart racing, and before I could answer, she laughed lightly, a sound that lingered like a brush of silk against bare skin. Then she turned, walking away, and I realized the moment wasn't over. It was only beginning. My chest ached with anticipation, a heady mix of curiosity and desire. Something was shifting, and I couldn't look away. The next day, the memory of last night lingered like a faint perfume I couldn't shake. Her smile, that fleeting touch of our fingers, and the way she had leaned in slightly. It all replayed in my mind, making me both anxious and strangely exhilarated. I reminded myself I shouldn't feel this way. She was my ex's mom, someone I had known for years, but had always put into a category I never crossed. Yet, something about her presence now seemed magnetic, impossible to resist. I remembered the first time I had really noticed her, not just as my ex's mother, but as a woman who carried herself with a quiet confidence, who could fill a room with her laughter without raising her voice. Back then, I had been oblivious, distracted by youthful awkwardness and teenage infatuation. But now, standing on the threshold of something undefined, I could see all the subtleties I had missed before. The way her eyes crinkled when she smiled, the gentle way she listened, the way her hand lingered over objects as if contemplating the world with a soft deliberateness. And yet, beneath her poise, I sensed cracks. Small ones at first, like a sigh too heavy for the moment, or a glance that flickered toward me with hesitation. There were secrets in her silences, vulnerabilities she didn't share with anyone, not even my ex. It made her real in a way that drew me closer, even as I reminded myself it was complicated, dangerous even. That afternoon, she had called me, just to check in, she said, but the sound of her voice over the phone made my pulse spike. She spoke softly, deliberately, asking about trivial things, yet the subtext was unmistakable. Each pause, each careful choice of words, hinted at something deeper. I wanted to ask about the cracks I saw in her life, to know the hidden truths that seemed to pulse just beneath the surface, but I was afraid. Afraid of what I might find, afraid of what I might want. When we finally met later, her presence hit me like a physical wave. We walked through the quiet park near her home, leaves crunching beneath our feet, and every time our arms brushed, a shiver ran through me. She laughed at something trivial, and I realized I was hanging on every sound, every movement, like it was a tether to something I had always denied wanting. There was playfulness, yes, but there was also a careful tension. two people testing boundaries without ever naming them. I wanted to ask the question that burned silently between us, the one I couldn't say aloud, why now? But we both knew some answers were too dangerous. Instead, we let the silence stretch, letting the tension speak for us, letting the space between us thrum with unspoken desire. And just like that, I knew our story was no longer about what had been lost. It was about what we could no longer ignore. The evening had a different weight, heavier than usual, as if the air itself knew the secret we were tiptoeing around. I arrived at her home under the guise of helping with some trivial task, but the moment she opened the door, the casualness between us fractured. Her eyes lingered on mine a second too long, and I felt a surge of something I couldn't name, desire, fear, or maybe both. She moved past me, brushing lightly against my shoulder as she passed, and my skin tingled from the contact. It was subtle, almost innocent, yet every nerve in my body hummed in response. I wanted to say something, anything, but words failed me. "I didn't expect you today," she said softly, a hint of amusement in her voice. Yet there was something else, an unspoken edge that hinted at longing. I noticed the way her gaze flickered when her phone buzzed with a message. I couldn't help the tiny spike of jealousy that pinched my chest. Who else could capture her attention like that? The thought was irrational, but it made me aware of how much I wanted to be the one holding her focus. We found ourselves in the living room, the dim lamplight casting shadows across her face, highlighting the softness of her features. There was a charged pause as our eyes met again, each glance a silent conversation. I could feel my heart racing, each beat loud enough to drown out the quiet hum of the house. The air seemed too small, too tight, as if it were compressing the tension into a palpable force between us. She laughed softly at something I said, a sound that wrapped around me and made my chest ache with an unspoken longing. I realized then that it wasn't just attraction. It was a pull, a magnetism neither of us had fully acknowledged, but both of us were teetering on the edge of giving in. And then, as she turned to adjust a vase on the shelf, our hands brushed again, slightly firmer this time. My fingers itched to stay, to linger just a second longer, but we both knew the danger of acting on impulses. Yet even as we pulled back, the electricity lingered, and I understood something vital. We were playing with fire, and neither of us could resist it for much longer. The rain had started by the time I arrived at her place, a soft drizzle tapping against the windows like a heartbeat, keeping time with mine. She was already inside, standing by the window, her silhouette framed by the pale streetlight. The sound of the rain made the room feel smaller, more intimate, as if the world beyond the walls didn't exist. "You stayed out too long," she said softly, turning to face me. Her voice was calm, but I caught the quick intake of breath that betrayed the flutter of nerves beneath her composed exterior. I stepped closer, almost unconsciously, and the space between us shrank until I could feel the warmth radiating from her. A sudden crash of thunder made us both start slightly, and she laughed, a soft, nervous sound that sent a shiver down my spine. Without thinking, I reached for her hand to steady her, and this time, our fingers intertwined naturally, as if they had always belonged together. The contact was electric, the kind that makes your chest tighten and your thoughts scatter. She tilted her head, eyes locking with mine, and for a moment, the air held its breath. There was so much unsaid, years of watching, longing, and wondering. But in that instant, it felt like the universe had paused, leaving only us suspended in the space between desire and restraint. "I shouldn't be feeling this," she whispered, almost to herself. But the way her eyes searched mine suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. We moved toward the couch, sitting side by side, a whisper of distance between us that felt impossibly thin. Each movement, each glance, each slight brush of our shoulders amplified the tension, building an invisible charge that made every second feel like an eternity. And then the power went out, plunging the room into shadow. Our eyes adjusted, and suddenly, the darkness made everything unavoidable. I could feel her breath, could hear the rapid rhythm of her heartbeat mirroring mine. The world had disappeared, leaving only the raw pull between us. She leaned slightly closer, her lips just inches from mine, and I knew the moment we had been circling. Teasing, testing, holding back, was about to break. But before anything could happen, a sudden knock on the door shattered the suspended world we had created. We froze, hearts racing, hands still brushing, and I realized we had just crossed the invisible line. The room felt smaller than ever, shadows dancing across the walls as the rain continued to drum against the windows. We were still seated on the couch, side by side, our fingers brushing every so often, the silence charged with things we hadn't said. And then she spoke, a tremor in her voice that caught me completely off guard. "There's something I need to tell you," she whispered, eyes fixed on her hands. My stomach tightened. My pulse raced. The way she looked so vulnerable, so raw, was almost unbearable. I leaned closer, careful, sensing that whatever she was about to reveal would change everything. I've never stopped thinking about you," she admitted, voice low but steady. The words hit me like a wave, leaving me stunned. She had been my ex's mother, a figure I had respected and kept at a distance. And yet, all this time, she had harbored feelings she never dared express. My chest tightened with a mixture of disbelief, longing, and a touch of guilt for even feeling elated by her confession. Before I could respond, the sound of her phone vibrating on the coffee table startled us both. She glanced down, then back at me, a shadow crossing her features. "It's him," she muttered, almost too softly for me to hear. My mind raced, my ex. The thought of him, the history, the forbidden nature of what she had just admitted. It added a risky, thrilling edge to the tension. I reached out, gently placing a hand over hers, grounding her. "I don't care about him," I said honestly, the words surprising even me. "I only care about you." Her eyes widened slightly, as if she hadn't expected me to feel the same way. And then, as if the dam had finally broken, she laughed softly, a mixture of relief and nervous exhilaration. The tension in her shoulders eased slightly, but the weight of the secret we now shared hung heavily in the air. We sat there for a long moment, hands intertwined, both of us aware that the world outside was complicated and messy, but inside, for these few stolen minutes, there was clarity. There was a connection neither of us could deny, a spark that had been years in the making and had finally been acknowledged. And just as the storm outside began to ease, she leaned back slightly, a teasing glint in her eye. "So what happens now?" she asked, and the question lingered between us like a dare, a promise, and a warning all at once. I didn't have an answer, but I knew one thing. Nothing would ever be the same again. The morning light filtered through the curtains, casting a soft glow over the room still heavy with last night's confessions. I couldn't stop thinking about what she had said, the truth finally out in the open, and the weight of it pressed down like a tangible thing. Yet, alongside the tension, there was a strange relief, the clarity of emotions no longer buried beneath years of hesitation. She entered the kitchen, her steps deliberate, every movement reflecting a mixture of nervousness and determination. Our eyes met, and in that silent glance, the consequences of what had been confessed were palpable. There were no words yet, only the heavy understanding that our choices, however long denied, now had to be faced. "You know this changes everything," she said quietly, breaking the stillness. Her voice carried both caution and daring, a challenge to meet the reality we had created. "I know," I replied, steady despite the racing in my chest. "But I don't want to ignore it. Not anymore." Her eyes softened, a mixture of vulnerability and something fiercer, like a resolve forged from years of restraint. "Neither do I," she admitted. She moved closer, and we were just a breath apart, the tension between us palpable yet tempered by the morning light, by the realness of our choices. We talked then. Not in whispered teases or lingering glances, but openly, bravely, confronting every hidden longing and fear. I learned the sacrifices she had made, the guilt she had carried silently. She learned of my own struggles, the confusion of wanting something forbidden yet undeniable. With every confession, the emotional knots between us unraveled, leaving raw honesty in their place. By the time the conversation ended, we were exhausted but lighter, the heaviness of secrecy replaced by a fragile, burgeoning clarity. She reached for my hand, not fleetingly this time, but with intention, and held it as if anchoring us both to the new reality we were stepping into. The world outside hadn't changed, and complications would remain. But in that room, surrounded by the gentle hum of the morning, a choice had been made. We would face the consequences together, embracing the risk and the reward, acknowledging that some truths were worth the turbulence they brought. And as we stepped toward the door, ready to confront the day and the challenges beyond, our eyes met again. This time with a warmth and quiet assurance that promised a story not ended, but only beginning. Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. The evening had settled into a calm hush, the kind that makes the world feel intimate and gentle. After days of confessions, tension, and unspoken longing, we found ourselves back in the quiet warmth of her living room. The rain from earlier had cleared, leaving a fresh, clean scent in the air, mingling with the faint aroma of her perfume. She smiled at me, a smile that carried both relief and quiet mischief. "I think we finally have a chance to start over," she said softly. Her hand found mine, fingers entwining naturally, effortlessly, like they had always been meant to fit together. I looked into her eyes, noticing every subtle detail: the curve of her lips, the warmth in her gaze, the gentle flicker of vulnerability that made her human and captivating all at once. "I've been waiting for this moment," I admitted, voice low but steady. "Waiting to tell you everything I've felt, everything I've wanted." Her laughter was soft, almost musical, carrying the weight of years of hidden longing. "I know," she whispered, "and I've been waiting too." We sat side by side on the couch, a comfortable closeness that felt natural yet exhilarating. The world outside didn't exist in that moment. Only the gentle rhythm of our breathing, the warmth of our hands pressed together, and the undeniable bond we had finally acknowledged. There were no games now, no hesitation. Just honesty, connection, and a mutual understanding that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. She rested her head lightly against my shoulder, and I could feel the steady rise and fall of her chest. I wrapped an arm around her, holding her with a quiet protectiveness, as if to reassure her that this bond we had formed was unshakable. For the first time in years, everything felt aligned, as though the universe had paused to let us catch up to the truth we had always known but never dared to admit. We stayed like that, talking softly, laughing at small, shared memories, and letting the silence stretch comfortably between us. It wasn't about passion in its rawest sense. It was about intimacy, understanding, and the quiet, profound satisfaction of being seen and accepted completely. And as the sun dipped behind the horizon, casting the room in a warm golden glow, we both realized that this was the start of something enduring. A bond built on trust, attraction, and a love that had survived hesitation and fear. For the first time, I felt truly at home, because I was exactly where I was meant to be.